Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to a brand new Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this February 1st, 2022. Tonight, in the spirit of the Valentine's Day season, we have Patti Negri joining us to talk about the power of love. It's going to be an interesting conversation. She'll be with us for the first segment only. Maybe she'll pop back in for segment 3. But she has a class to teach. But for the first hour, she's all yours. And we'll be hearing about this fantastic subject from the metaphysical perspective as well as from the perspective of the true intrinsic power of this thing we call love. Don't go away. Welcome everyone to tonight's Vestiges After Dark. I'm really excited to be here with you all as usual, and tonight is going to be a fantastic show as we dive deep into the subject of love from all different perspectives. On this first segment, we'll be having the wonderful Patti Negri to join us to talk about this, the subject from the perspective of her work, and maybe even get into the kind of power that love has in terms of witchcraft or even in metaphysical understanding. On the second part, we'll be doing the usual questions from the ether, but because Patti is pressed for time, we're going to jump right in. But in segment 2, Father Chris will join us, and we'll continue on with the subject of love. And then on somewhere between segments 2 and 3, we'll be taking your questions and calls. So I'm looking forward to all of this tonight, and it's going to be an interesting time. So joining us here is Sister Mary Joan and Patti Negri. How are you both doing tonight?
Good evening, everyone. Good to be here. This should be good.
I am so excited to be here. It just gets me to see your beautiful smiling faces. It's been too long. Thank you.
Right back at you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is, we miss you so much. I really wish, so many of our colleagues weren't so far away, but almost everybody is on the other side of the country.
Right.
Yeah, I say that all the time. You guys are on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
We all need Vegas again.
That's right. Vegas is always, it's that wonderful meeting point, We. So tonight, Patti, we talked last time you were on the show, and we were discussing very briefly about what you wanted to talk about when you came back for season 5, and here you are, and you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about love. So I know that you had some specific things in mind, and I'm not even sure where you want to take the conversation, but I'm just here for the ride, and I'm curious to see what insights you have for us tonight.
I have no idea what I had planned at the time. Don't even ask me what I expected. But love, I can talk on. The power of love itself. I mean, I like what you're going to get into later about the words and wording and things like that, because we need bigger words. We need more words, because to me, it's, I was going to say the heart of everything, but it is the heart. We picture it as a heart, the heart not looking necessarily like the one in our particular, human bodies, but I think it honestly is the power that drives most everything that I do in my work, in my how I am inspired, how I choose to inspire others, how I learn, and it's not a bubble of love. We see where it's missing and where it lacks and where it hurts and where it feels. But the energy behind it and the purity behind it, there's nothing like it. I mean, we could name 912 sayings and they're all song titles.
Well, it's true. Right? I mean, I had a sermon last week on the subject of love. It was actually the sermon that I gave because there was the whole part of St. Paul in his letter to the Corinthians, and he's talking about love, and he's talking about
13:13.
Yes, how love is how love is patient and love is kind. It's kind of a famous thing. Even people that have never read the Bible seem to know that verse, and it's because it is so pervasive and it is so meaningful to us. So, and then later I got into the subject in that sermon about how the New Testament even calls God love. It says God is love. And I thought, that's really significant because one of the biggest challenges, I think, for people when they read the Bible is knowing what's literal and what's figurative. There's a lot of metaphor, parable, simile. Jesus even likes to talk a lot in metaphor. He uses parables to kind of explain these things that are lofty ideas that perhaps we don't have good words for. So that's why he uses these analogies. But when it comes to the Bible being that specific, saying God is love, that is that's no accident. It was intended to be that. So even from the most traditional and conventional Judeo-Christian perspective, love is seen as the actual divine force itself. So it doesn't surprise me that everything that you do, because that's what you do, you work with divine forces. I mean, it would have to be love. Otherwise, it's not divine.
Again, we are talking about vibrational, higher vibrations and lower vibration. That, to me, is the highest vibration it is. And if you want to use the word God, yay. If you want to use the word source, great. If you just want to use the word love, great. It's that highest, purest vibration that, to me, can be molded into emotions. It could be molded into healing. It could be molded into enlightenment. I mean, because it is all of those things.
It is. And it means so many different things. And like I said, we'll get into it with the second segment for the audience. We'll be talking about how inept our language is when it comes to the subject of love, because we really need more of a diversified understanding. And I think our language does some, it doesn't do it justice. Let's just put it that way. But when we're talking about, like the power of love, particularly in an actual sense of it being a power, in the sense of how you would use it, in the direction of creating something, or, perhaps casting a spell, or combining it for some kind of metaphysical working. I know some people will say, well, if love is the central force of all that, then what about black magic? What about evil? It's like, well, it's the absence of love. So it's still about love. It's just, you're pulling it away. So black magic, essentially, if you want to define white magic and black magic, you do it very simply. White magic is the direction of love, and black magic is removing it. Would you agree with that?
100% I agree with that. But which is why I've never seen a purpose in doing black magic.
Yeah.
Because you can get everything you need to create from white magic, from love. Why would you go to the place where there was no love? Just think about how, even if we just go to the mundane human emotional, when you feel love, how you feel. When you don't feel love, how you feel. Why would you work at that source?
Yeah, love is the opposite of selfishness, which when I think of someone taking the left-hand path, I think of selfishness. I don't want to make anybody mad out there, but that's what comes into my mind. Why would you want to do that when you can share the most powerful force in the universe? And that's love.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think they want to do it, Patti, or do you think it's if it's an expression of some type of internal turmoil that they haven't resolved? Do you think it's willful?
All of the above. I think some people, it's somebody, it's like rebellion in a sense.
Yeah.
This working so there, it's almost like I'll show you.
It'd be so dangerous, though.
Yeah, and again, because anybody I know, and I'm not even judgmental because who am I to judge?
Right.
Of what it is. But anybody I know, and I understand the different people use different terms for left-hand path and this and that. But anybody I know who really gets into dark magic, they're not anywhere close on the happiness scale of me or anybody I know who works in love, works in light. All of a sudden, this anger comes into them. All of a sudden, this paranoia comes into them. All of this, it's like, how's that working for you? They're all going to get whatever. It's like, okay, you got whatever the spell working was, using dark arts, and it's like, and how's that working for you? Yeah. It doesn't. I've never seen it. They fall into this misery, and I don't even know if they notice it, and then they have to do more dark magic, and it gets into this just ruthless.
Well, their life force is being siphoned off, and they don't even realize it. Yeah.
Ruthless circle, and of just, again, trying to scratch it back. And it's just like, why? If you believe in, even if you go to magic, what you put out, you get back, or you get back 3 times. Why are you going to put out controlling other people and hurting other people? Because guess what? It's going to bounce back, whether you call that karma, whether you call it retribution, whether you call
it doesn't seem very wise. I mean, certainly. And I mean, it for me, at least in terms of how I've always reconciled it intellectually, is that it's some kind of neurosis. That it really is. It's just they have unresolved traumas or feelings or something within themselves that is expressing itself this way. And because they have made a lifestyle out of these negative emotions, they don't know how to exist or find an identity away from them, because to give up those negative emotions, they, as they know themselves, would have to cease to exist. And that can sometimes be terrifying when you've built an ego out of negativity and destructive behavior. Yeah. So but I mean, as far as volition, I'm not so sure there's any volition there outside of the fact that it's misdirected volition.
Yeah. I just don't get, because you see, I mean, you almost see the energy that each create, whether you consider yourself intuitive or a gift, you see it. My best example of working with positive is that people who get to come from the dark place, the lack of love is, like you said, the selfishness, I don't have it, this is mine, and holding on to mine, this is mine. My best example of that is in how I do my magic. And again, because I use love, I use spirit, and I should be sick and dead. I'm not neither. I don't get sick. It's like through love, through light, that's life force. But when I decided to show that, going, I'm supposed to be dead or in a wheelchair, and I'm neither. So I'm gonna get on this TV show, Wipeout. I'm gonna get on this scary, the world's largest obstacle course, Wipeout. Not suited for it at all. I was probably twice as old as most people on the show. I'm not specifically an athlete. I had all these health problems that should have been fractures in your back and tumors in your brain. And when I started going on the auditions, it wasn't your typical, I'm a Hollywood kid. I've been going on auditions since I was born, whatever you do. And it's like, oh, this is mine. I hope they don't get it. I hope they don't get it. Oh, I hope they, or the dance audition. I hope she breaks her ankle. I hope she trips over that. And I went complete opposite. Yeah. I'm whether this like, oh my gosh, you're going to do great. You look so and I'm all this energy I'm throwing out to these people, and sincerely, you can't fake it. It's sincerely like, oh my God, and you get the stories, and all of that shine right back on me, and that wasn't even the intention. And then there I am on the show, and I'm like, oh my God, that is the power of love. That is what you put out, you get back. So again, I'm like, okay, I beat, literally, the first thing they tell you is you beat like 100,000 people to get on it. And I should not. I go, wow, this is amazing. What can I also show the power of what we can do? Again, working with light, working with love. Okay, I can't cook. So I'm going to cook for Gordon Ramsay. Again, I'm a Hollywood kid. I was kicked out back. My husband won't let me in the kitchen. So it's like, I'm going to get on Master Chef. I'm going to cook for Gordon Ramsay. So again, I played the whole witch card, and I talked about magical cooking, what you put into your food matters. Go clockwise and stir in love in your kids' oatmeal. Don't put that stress. It's going to go in. But I played this whole card, and next thing I know, again, I beat 100,000 people, and I'm cooking for Gordon Ramsay on Master Chef. And the same thing, I was going, oh my God, that's a beautiful dish. I hope you get there. And that first time when you're at those big auditions where there's 5,000 people in the convention center, and they're going to every convention center in the country, and you're one of those people, and the love you're just putting out, and seeing the enthusiasm of people, and the fear, and calming them down. And that wasn't even my intent to come back at me. That's just who I am. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, wow, I did Master Chef. What can I do next? And now it's kind of like, this is fun. So what am I really not right for? America's Got Talent. I have no talent for America's Got Talent. I'm not that kind of a singer or a dancer, and those are just the most talented people on the planet on this show.
Well, and those shows, I think AGT's got a bit of a bias towards the singers anyway. So it seems like anybody that's got a non-singing talent is already working at a bit of a disadvantage with that show. Yeah. I know.
And I played what I did, and I'm like, I'm reading and but next thing I know, I am rolling around on the floor of the Dolby Theater with Howie on America's Got Talent. It didn't last long, as well I shouldn't have. But I'm like, oh my God, we are such powerful beings. When we work with that vibration, when we work with love, when we work with light, God, it's like, it's limitless. All those things they say about it are true.
And see, that's what needs to be understood by those that haven't experienced it, because I really think that's what causes the darkness. And I think that's what causes people to gravitate towards these darker metaphysical operations, because they've never really known love. So it's like they don't really have any relationship with it. And so therefore, their entire reality is the absence of it. So they work with things that are absent to it, or the deviations of it, or the inversions of it rather. And that's the sadness of it. And that's what I deal with in Sister Mary Joan as well. When we go into cases of demonic possession or oppression, it can be traced back to some kind of,
there's always some kind of childhood trauma.
Usually. Almost always. That's why it's one of the biggest things that even in the conventional church, they'll tell you this. It's not even just, something that we've observed in our little ministry, but even the larger church, of Rome has recognized that the most common risk factor for people to develop a demonic possession is being abused sexually as a child. It's the biggest one. And I can't think of anything that could be more twofold, because not only is it an experience that is completely devoid of true, genuine love, it's also a bastardization of what is supposed to be a loving act. Yeah. Between two consenting people, of course, but not when it's being used as a method of control or personal gratification, which are both selfish things and devoid of love as a result of it. So it doesn't surprise me that there are and these people are self-destructive too, because that's what the absence of love is. See, if love is creation, let's break it down. I've always said, I tell my students all the time, you'll understand this because you work in metaphysics. And if any, Christian philosophers are in the audience right now, think about this, because this is the way it works. There's two forces in the universe. Okay. Not to speak of duality, because I'm not saying there's two gods. I think that there's an overwhelming divine force, and I think that can be expressed multiple ways. And I think that's where we get the pantheon of polytheism. So I don't have a conflict with polytheism, because I see it more in the Hindu context, where you have the primary divine force, which they call Brahman, and then like thousands and tens of thousands of expressions, or hundreds of thousands of expressions of that divine force that can come forward in the various gods and goddesses of the pantheon. So I still see it as a monotheistic ultimately a monotheistic operation, because it's just a divine force and different ways of expressing it. But, let's just talk for a second to those Christian philosophers who might struggle with what I'm about to say, because I'm not talking dualism, okay? There are two forces in the universe. There is the creative force, and there's what I call the reabsorption force. It's not destruction for destruction's sake. It's destruction with purpose. Evil comes from the misuse of the reabsorption force. And what it is it's a misdirection of the creative energy, devoid of the creative energy, because what the creative energy derives all of its energy from the reabsorption of recycled energy. So you put energy out there, it spawns into being, it falls out of being, but the energy that it once was might not be cohesive anymore, but it remains. And we know that from the laws of thermodynamics. So this is pure science in this sense, that energy cannot be created or destroyed. The cohesion's what's created or destroyed. So, things can come into complex cohesive forms, which would be sort of like a human being, where there's intellect and higher emotions and everything else. And then, that person dies, that cohesion falls apart, but the energy that they were, that's still there. That gets sort of, if it's not redirected to something higher, which would be sort of like where we get into concepts of afterlife or reincarnation, then it's reabsorbed, and then it spawns again into something new. It doesn't get destroyed, it gets reabsorbed. The destruction is when all of that process is misused and misdirected. And that's selfish reasons usually. But in the church, they come up with all these complex words like sin. and they get people all riled up over these words because they don't really go into detail as to explaining what we're really talking about when we say sin. It just sounds like, oh, you're doing wrong. You're making God angry. You're a bad person. You're doing the wrong thing. And that's like the least of what sin is. That's actually a very, I would say, childish way of looking at sin. Sin is if you really want to break it down, sin is the absence of love. It really is. And evil is the absence of love. Sin and evil I see as synonyms of each other. It's just, when you sin, you're participating in evil. And that reality is not even real. So Christian philosophers should understand that evil's not a real thing. Evil is the negation of a thing, which makes it sort of needs love to exist, but it's like the absence of it that makes it anything at all, which is really nothing. It's just, it's a void. So if it's the power of creation itself, then this is where all religions get their power and all belief systems. And this is what can unify us. And that's what love is really all about. It's about making things whole. One of the gifts of the Holy Spirit in a Christian context is love. And even it's even stated in scripture that it's the highest gift. We have all these gifts, right? Some of them are quite magical, like speaking in languages that you've never studied, prophecy, which can almost be interpreted in some ways as almost like psychic ability. It's just like a Christian safe way of saying it, but it's kind of the same thing. There's all these gifts, discerning spirits, which, that's kind of a metaphysical gift. But, all these powerful things, and even after all that, including faith, which is also a gift, love is still considered higher.
That's what I was referring to earlier at Corinthians 13.
Yeah. Yes.
But now abide in faith, hope, and love, these three. And the greatest of these is love.
Yeah, the greatest of these is love. And so it's very well established, what is expected of us in terms of how do we achieve to these higher and greater realities. And some of it, I think, comes natural. And Patti, it comes natural to you, because you're already, first of all, aligned that way, which helps, I'm sure. But, and I'm sure there's different things that we could get into as to why some people are aligned this way and some are not. I think it does come back to a little bit of nature versus nurture.
Well, Patti does exude a lot of light. The first time we met her, her light came into the room before she did. It was like a beacon got turned on, and then here comes Patti. Hey! And it was just like a breath of fresh air.
You could be at the busiest casino at the busiest time of day, and she can walk in, and it would be like it's like the parting of the Red Sea. There she is. So yes, Patti, it does. You are projecting it. I can tell.
You really do. Yeah, honestly. Yeah.
That you really are doing these things. You're not just saying it because it sounds nice. You really are doing these things because it's visible to those of us who know how to see it.
Yeah.
It's visible. And I would think that you'd have to be practically blind not to see it with you. So it's a beautiful thing. And I'm sure that that's a big part of what you teach your students, isn't it?
Because it's energy again, in that, and everything is energy, right? We're energy,
Right.
nothing's what it is. And yes, I was built this way, but I always haven't been like that. That is where we really can. I mean, I had many, many years in there where I was pretty not this. I was
Really?
pretty miserable and ill and victim-y, and we have choices. We have choices.
Yeah.
And it gets easier the more you go, but you have to step into it.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear, I mean, you don't have to go into details, but I'd like to hear a little bit about how you pulled yourself out of that. Like, what were the steps that you did? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening right now that are in perhaps the situation that you once were, maybe even worse off, and maybe they are ready to take the step to a better way of life. What are those first steps? What did you do to help yourself arrive at where you are today?
Well, I think what it was, at, again, basic happy person, good family, all that. But when I was like 15, I was diagnosed with this thing called DES. It's a drug my mom had taken with health issues and female health issues. And scary stuff like, oh, you could die and you can get the breast cancer and vaginal cancer and this cancer, and you can't have kids. And again, and scary stuff for a 15-year-old to hear, 16-year-old surgeries. And then you find out you can't have kids. And I kept falling into victim mode. And again, that feel sorry for yourself. And this literally cost me 2 marriages. I mean, they knew it before we went there, but, oh, you can't. And I just, in a sense, kind of fell into this darkness. You give up that hope. You give up that light again of everything. And weirdly enough, it sort of is selfish, as sad as it is, and victim it is. And I didn't ever put blame on myself. It's like, that poor me. Well, maybe it isn't just about me. Maybe it's whatever that is. But so I spent literally 15 years like that. Again, not the happy, having every health issue. I used to have to carry like mineral dose packs because I would swell up and get weird rashes. And anybody I hear that when you have autoimmune diseases, to me, those are the ones that are about the balance and how love can cure autoimmune. I'm sorry, you guys. And as soon as that's anything that's really hard to diagnose for doctors, because is it lupus? We don't know. Is it fibromyalgia? We don't know. I had arthritis at 16. I had 5 fractures in my spine. And it just was like falling down the rabbit hole. What is love? But yet I was developing my spiritual practice, and I was studying like you, not to the in depth of you, Bishop, of religion, because my grandfather was this big philosopher, psychoanalyst, though very atheist in his beliefs.
I remember you telling him about his atheism.
So I followed his footsteps, but again, from an opposite, I understand this light, because I would drive by and I understood love. Even in my victim even when before I hit the victim, I'd drive by a church and I'd see the light and enter it. And then I'd drive by a temple or a synagogue and see it, or a mosque and see it, or a park and see it. And the people going in and the people coming out, this life force, and which is love to me. Again, whether you call it Buddha, God, I saw that alive, and I always held on to that. So in my searching of path, as I'm discovering, again, early days Wicca point of view, love, it is about love. Again, I was very goddess oriented, but I get it. Oh, love. Okay, so I have that. So by the time I reached the pinnacle of like, if you at 30, the tumor is so big in my head that it's causing blindness and my fractures in my back and all these precancerous things. So the basic diagnosis or prognosis was, if you make it to 50, which you probably won't because you'll get all these cancers, you'll be in a wheelchair. And I was not an athlete, but I was a dancer. It's like, I don't want to be in a wheelchair. And I went, well, wait, there's this other thing out there, whether I call it magic or faith or God or spirit or spell word. There's this thing out there, and this is what it does. And I've always seen what it did. So no, I'm not going to accept that limited belief system. I'm not going to stop that limited. I don't want that diagnosis. I don't want that prognosis. everything went away. Every symptom went away. Yes, I did what the doctor said I was supposed to do. I had faith. I started working magically. I started working with spirit, God, energy, herbs, earth, Mother Earth, balancing what I was with breath, with what all those things that is of our planet, because we still are corporal human beings, divine and human. And I haven't been sick in decades. And that's why I did that silly TV show. I'm like, okay, I'm turning 50. I'm not dead. I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm going to do, the world's hardest obstacle course and it's so empowering. It's like, wow. And I didn't take full credit. What I could do is what I did working with spirit. What I did, it's here for us. It's here.
It's interesting. Just about a minute ago, I didn't want to interrupt you, but a minute ago, there was a strange orb-like mass that kind of flew out from your right side, the left side of the screen, and it went right towards your torso. So I don't know what the mark is. Yeah, somebody in the audience mark down what the timestamp is right now. It was about a minute before now.
Roughly about a minute or a minute and a half.
Yeah, and go back and check that, and we'll see if we can figure out if it was something else. But it looked like a strange mass of something. Didn't even look like a classic orb. It looked like almost like a C shape kind of thing, kind of floating in. It was weird.
It definitely had shape to it. It wasn't spherical.
Yeah, it wasn't just a sphere of light.
Right.
Yeah.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah.
But getting back to what you're saying, Patti, it's a process, clearly. So how long would you say was the process to where you went from this sick person who was kind of broken and despondent to this new, healthy, happy Patti Negri? How long did that take, that transition?
Not very long. And I think that depends. And working with people now, to me, it's again, how much faith can you have? I was like, I'm done with this. So all of a sudden, I was just healthy. That would go even for scans and all this, like, you're healthy. Like, yeah, I know. I know. And it's faith. But if somebody and I believe that, so it could. And I think that's how faith healing works, whether you're in the church, if you believe that, you can. If you have a little bit of faith and you're not quite sure, allow yourself to heal 1% a day. Allow yourself to work with God, energy. Allow yourself to heal 2% or 5%, and then grow into it. I mean, some people need baby steps of faith of stepping into it, and some people just like, give it to me now.
Yeah,
it's that same power. It's that same energy.
Are there rituals that people can perform to maybe expedite or help facilitate this process of internal healing?
I do. And I do think it is, again, going within and finding that love, finding that light, finding that hope, all the things that's mentioned in that Corinthians.
Yes. Corinthians.
Hope. You have to have hope or you're doomed. You have to have that. And I think it's inner work very much. Yes, you can do rituals, and I do rituals all the time. That ends into that mind, body, spirit thing that, 20,000 books. You have to believe it with everything. Again, even those dark magicians can choose it. You have at least enough faith, mind, you have body, you have to take action. You have to get off the couch, whatever that means. And the spirit, that's the magic. That's the faith. That's the God. That's the working. Whether it's because you've gone in prayer to church to do it, or maybe you're new age and it's vision boards and affirmations. It's that faith to do it. Or you're working with your mugwort and your dragon's blood and your candle working to spirit. That's the battery that makes it happen. Love is a battery, and it's the highest vibration.
Is it dangerous for somebody to work with magic if they're in one of these dark these dark places? Yeah. Should they do something to sort of clear their space before they start doing magical operations, just because there might be so much negativity surrounding them?
I think it's all in intent, yes. But again, light beats dark. Excuse me. Every time you bring a candle into a room, you light it up. Oh yeah, you're going to see the scary shadows there, or whatever that is. But you brought in the light. So yes,
on the light.
You focus on the light, and it is your intent. I even think in magic and in working stuff, it is your intent. and if it's, even if you're doing the wrong candle and the wrong herb and the wrong whatever, it's the heart. It's the love, but the intent. So it doesn't matter if you're doing it the wrong direction. It's again, that's what it is. So yes, create sacred space, create clear space, however that works for you. Like you were saying, whether it's pantheon or your cosmology, different what wording or template you're putting on top. But it's good. And I think of somebody, I do think that's where we have to get back into. Moral code. You use words like integrity, virtue, ethics, moral code. And that's where it all comes from. And maybe that's the people who don't have it. I guess there is some mental thing. Serial killers don't have the really know right from wrong, but most of us do. You do. And so there's your temperature, Gabe. And I even tell people, if you honestly don't think you have a moral code of knowing right and wrong, then maybe step back and learn something more by rote until you get there.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, I like that. I think it's definitely versatile, and certainly no excuse that anybody couldn't jump right in and start working something.
Yeah. It's what, again, that mind, body, spirit of psychology, not to believe it, body, taking action of some sort, spirit, the faith, magic, spell working, affirmation, prayer chain behind it does it. In craft working and spell working, we call that creation working dispatch. Same thing, creation. Creation is like the mind. Okay, I'm going to do a love spell. I'm going to do Friday because that's the day of Venus. That's love. I'm going to use rose petals because they're a high vibration flower. I'm going to put some lavender. We'll bring some water for emotion. Candle light. Some pinks for love. So again, that's the mind part. Body is the working. You're sitting there carving the candle or stirring the earth. And the spirit, again, is that sending it off to the heavens, sending it off to the light. It's all the same, just different words.
Yeah. What would be a very simple thing that you could suggest somebody do if they're trying to remove a spirit of negativity from inside themselves? What would you say is a simple thing that they could do, maybe tangible, whether it be the type of candle or type of herb? What would you suggest?
I would, again, salt's for everything. You need a little salt bath, great. Eggshells is great for everything. You know, ground eggshell, sarsaparilla powder, great. But I really think it's about balance. We get off kilter when we get off balance. So again, I work elementally, that air and fire and water and earth that pagans do, that Native Americans do, that Peruvians do. But if you literally, if you look at your life, you look at yourself as these four elements. Earth, it's who you are. It's your persona. It's your home. It's who you are. Then that's in the north because you're put in the compass. And your fire, well, that's your passion. Your creativity is that in a sternocan, is that blazing too big? Who you are and what drives you. Earth and fire. But where we all get off balance is west and east. West and east, what is that? It's water and air. What is it? What do we need more than anything to survive? Yet the human is, again, because we're talking the physical body, is water and air. Yeah. So if water is our emotions and air, go, okay, where am I so off balance right now? Is it my emotions? I'm angry. I'm this and that. You need balance of water. You know, I have these little things. Go run your hands under water. That's why you feel so good after a shower, no matter what.
It's true. Water, yeah, that's true.
The water, it's naturally in water, given by God, given by nature. Okay, no, it's not my emotions. It's my head. I've got the chatter brain. You're probably not breathing. Our air element is our focus. It's our clarity. Birds on a wing. Even spirit. So breathe, do some vowel sounds. I do a lot of heka work, which is kind of Egyptian magic. Every sound we make has an effect on us. That's why we chant, and that's why we sing, and we use cadence, whether it's singing in church, whether we're doing, but without going into every letter. Vowels open up to spirit. That's why pretty much every sacred word is a vowel. Amen. Om. Native American, hey, East Indian, yeah, falling in love, roller coaster, opens up this whole crown of illumination, opens up that spirit. So I can't say it, I'm foggy, and breathe, amen, whatever. chatter lifts, fog lifts, chatter stops. That easy. And you get yourself balanced, and then you can almost think straight. Then you can feel straight. Okay, what is it I need? Okay, I have no self-love. I need to go there. Then you figure out, I'm going to work a candle. It's your earth. You're just not grounded at all. Maybe that's your upgrade. Get grounded. Take a walk in a park, hug a tree. If you can't hug a tree, grab a pencil. If you're on the
take your shoes off, walk in the grass.
Walk in the grass, earthing. Yeah. Any stone, any rock, any piece of wood, you can always find a pencil, wooden table. That still has that spirit of grounding.
Yeah.
Hold on to it, breathe, put intention, whether you call that a prayer or an affirmation. You're talking to the spirit of the tree, you're talking to God. Ground you. Again, if it's the fire element, maybe you have no energy because you've given up on life. You need the fire. The same as Holy Spirit is that fire. Or if it's the breath of a dragon or the spirit of Pele or the beating of a heart. Again, dance around a bonfire, light the candles to your church. And if you can't do that, the sound for that to me is Z. That's a lightning strike. Ask any 8-year-old what does a bee sound? Zzz, that's that Kundalini. All of a sudden, whether you're talking to the Holy Spirit, to God, to Jesus, to the element of fire itself, to passion, to just with this 30 seconds of deep breathing, 30 seconds of Z. I need to pull in the fire. Zzz. Within 30 seconds, you'll feel the tingling in the base of your spine in that Kundalini energy, and you will begin to have that fire or passion or creativity or connection to spirit, connection to dawn. Balance.
It's all about balance. It really is in every possible way. In fact, when we get into the second segment here, we'll be talking a little bit about that too. Patti, we're at the 45 minutes in, and I know that you needed to jet. So do you have any last thoughts? And maybe we'll see you in the third segment for a quick little round.
Yeah, if I could come back with you, I would love to come back. Listen to these guys. They know what they're talking about, you guys. I love you. And what I want to say real quick, I love how people, because we're in crazy times, as you know, and between pandemics and unrest and all this shit, I notice people, and with sincerity, not just love you, are saying, I love you more, even to just friends. That's why we do. It's not just, I love you to your spouse. I love you, your dog and your kid. I love you. And I'm hearing it from everybody. And it's like, it makes me so happy. So you guys, I love you.
Well, we love you too, Patti. And we can't wait until things normalize and we can go to Vegas and just have a lot of fun again.
Get that hug.
I'll kind of click back on if I can. So
okay.
Have
a good class.
If I don't see you, we'll be in touch, and we'll get you back on here. But if hopefully we'll see you in a couple hours.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you, Patti. So yeah, sister. I mean that was fantastic. I mean, she really just gives so much insight into the actual physical working, because I think witchcraft, one thing that makes it kind of special is that even in Christianity, love is still kind of ethereal. I mean, there's tangibles to it, clearly, but it's got an ethereal element. But, in witchcraft, I have to say that I got to give it credit. There's a way of bringing it down to where you can almost touch it. And
it's focus.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, when she was talking about basically, healing herself, it reminded me of when I was in the hospital and I had all of these people, hundreds of people, some, most I knew, some I didn't. My accident made the news. I had prayer warriors all over the place. And I had the doctors telling me that, number one, your career's over. You'll never shoot again, because my left arm was screwed up and I shoot left-handed. Then they said I wouldn't walk for at least 6 months. And I was basically like, that's not going to work for me. And the doctor's like, I don't think you realize how screwed up you are.
Right. Yeah.
And my dad told the doctor, I don't think you know my daughter.
Yeah.
And so that gave me a little more inspiration. And, I hate being told I can't do something. So I was back to work in 6 months.
See, and that's the power. That's the power she's talking about.
When all the visitors have gone and the nurses have come and got their blood for the night, and you get a few hours of sleep in the middle of the night, I would lay there and I would basically kind of meditate. At the time I wasn't really religious, but I did have that crazy near-death experience. So I had a lot of things going through my head trying to figure it out. And I would lay there and just basically will my body to heal. And I would basically visualize light coming from of all the people who prayed for me coming into my body and healing my broken body. And I was released from the hospital 6 weeks early. Wow. Now, granted, I am stubborn as hell, and that helped, but I have to give a lot of credit to the people who projected that love for me. And I was able to use that energy. And I believe that I was able to heal myself from a lot of that. So I totally get what she's saying about that.
Well, we participate in the miraculous. You know, I think people get this idea that the miracles that come from God is some kind of like just this special gift that, you know, just sort of just pops up and automatically happens. And I'm not going to say that it can't take that form. I'm certainly in certain situations it can. But more often than not, we participate in the miraculous. It's not just a one-sided thing. It's something that we participate in. You see that even in the scriptures when Jesus says, you know, your faith has healed you. Yeah. I mean, I think, and we're not talking about believing as much as we're talking about having absolute confidence. You don't necessarily have to believe hard. You have to have confidence in what you're setting out to do. And I don't like the word belief very much because it sounds too magical. It sounds sometimes too difficult. There are people like, how can I believe in anything anymore when, you know, my life is this screwed up? And it's like, well, maybe you can't. I can understand that. But what you can do is you can direct your focus to such a degree that you can build confidence in a particular tangible operation. That's what I like about what Patti was sharing, is the tangibility of it, because it's very hard. Christians don't have this as much. We have it in the sacraments, thank God, for those of us who actually make use of the sacraments. But more often than not, most Christians in the United States don't have sacraments in that respect. They're in one of the numerous, you know, Protestant denominations that sort of devalue them. Some don't even have them. And if those that do have something of it, it's not the same thing. And so tangibility is very difficult sometimes for Christians to latch onto, because all they've got is, oh, you don't have enough faith. Oh, God's not answering your prayer. You're not praying hard enough. You don't have enough faith. And it's very insulting to someone who's in crisis to be told that. And I see it a lot. I see other Christians using that as an excuse because...
Or on the opposite end, when you have something miraculous happen to you, like it did with me while I was in the hospital, I had 4 or 5 different chaplains come in to talk with me and pray with me and ask me things. And I told them what I was experiencing. And every single one of them, oh, well, you know, you're on a lot of medication. You've been through a lot of trauma.
Yeah, they marginalize
No, you're not hearing me.
Yeah.
So it was very frustrating for me because there was literally no one I could talk to at the time that could understand it except for a few close friends of mine who gave me a good ear. But as far as clergy, they all just dismissed it right out.
Well, you'll find, and I'm sure you know this now because you've been involved in the church for a while, but you'll find that sometimes clergy are the worst in terms of having faith. And I don't know if it's just because the challenges of being clergy are so great that it can sometimes be too much for some people. And, you know, I'm the first one to say, I don't like the old axiom that says God never gives you more than you can handle. A bullshit. Oh, he absolutely can give you more than you can handle, and he'll double it. So I don't like that. What it really should be is that God never gives you more than you have the ability to work out. But it doesn't mean that at the moment that you get whatever it is that you have the strength to handle it, because in a lot of cases you don't, but you can sometimes find it, and survivors will find it, and those that give up easily won't. But yeah, God gives you much more than you can handle. And sometimes I think for clergy in particular, it's too much for them to handle. And it results in a crisis of faith. And we have St. John of the Cross with, you know, this entire dissertation on the dark night of the soul. It's a perfect example of what can happen when we struggle with connecting to God. And the closer you get, the harder it can sometimes be. The challenges are always different. I find that it's not a roller coaster. It's more like an elevator, a lightning elevator, like a turbo lift in Star Trek, right to the top. Then it plateaus for a while. Everything's good. And then you just fall off the cliff again.
Well, it's like the Tower of, Tower of Terror at Universal
Yeah, it's a lot like that. Yeah.
You're sitting there like, well, are they going to pull the lever? And about the time you're like, well, this is stupid. And then they just drop. Screaming the entire way.
It is screaming the entire way. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour, so we're going to break right here, and we'll come back for part 2 here in just a moment, where I will do questions from the ether. Going to get a little controversial tonight, so look out. I will try not to offend too many people, but I guess what? Everyone's going to get offended tonight. That's just the way it is. Stick around and find out. And then we'll talk more about love with Father Chris.
pushing my limits and all the drive that I have. Well, I'm going the distance with you. I didn't know what I had till I knew what was missing, and everything that I dread. Well, I built a resistance. spend, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. Take your time, not in the fast lane. I understand that you've been broken too many times, but I'll be waiting to make you lose from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other, admit our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you off the ground. That's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of tonight's Vestiges After Dark. We just got finished with talking with Patti Negri about love, and coming up here in the second part, we're going to expand upon that, talking about the different types of love and how inadequate the human language, or I should say the English language, but also humanity in its ability to communicate, how lacking it is in this regard. But first, questions from the ether. A controversial one tonight. Don't go away. Well, thank you for sitting through the break there. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed Patti Negri. She's always such a pleasure to have on, and such a wonderful friend, full of life and full of positivity, which is really a big part of what love really is all about. And speaking of which, as I mentioned during the first part there, and if you listen to my sermons, if you tune into the live mass that we have and listened to last week's sermon, you know that I talked a little bit about love, and its predominant manifestation as a unifying factor, because essentially that's what it is. I mean, think about all of the analogies, the two become one flesh, in marriage and matrimony as one of the expressions, the sacramental expression of human love. It's a powerful thing, okay? And that's really what this show's all about tonight. But the unity is central, because see, love, and we're going to get into this, and Father Chris will be able to, I'm sure, give us great insights as well, from both philosophical and theological perspectives on the different types of love. But the one thing that all love is unifying, isn't it? It doesn't tear things apart. Religion in its very self, the very word, means to bind together. It was to bring people together, not to force them into submission, but to bring them into a free relationship, which is the kind of relationship that we are supposed to have with God. But this world is not really very good at unity, is it? It's worse than it's ever been in my lifetime. I'm not going to say it's the worst it's ever been in the world. Certainly we've been through rough patches before, long before I was born, long before any of us were born, really. And it kind of ebb and flows. But right now we're in a rough patch, and there is definitely a lot of disunity in the world. And nowhere more is that seen than in political controversies. And so I'm not going to get political tonight, at least not too political, because I just don't feel there's a reason to. And I try to avoid politics as much as possible unless it comes up. Well, there was a question that was asked of me, and that's tonight's question from the ether. And usually I do this at the beginning of the show, but because Patti was pressed for time and I wanted you all to have maximum time with her, we pushed it off to this segment. And this came in from an unlikely source. This is the unusual part of this, because typically speaking, when I draw these questions, they're coming in from social media, people that are trying to reach, Bishop Bryan, and they have a question. They didn't know they were reaching Bishop Bryan. This was a political text that came to my phone. In the United States here, we get a lot of texts coming in. And the interesting thing about political texts that come into your phone is that they're not automated, almost never. They're usually monitored by an actual human being. And so I tend to respond to political texts because, first of all, they're unsolicited. So if you're going to bother me, you're going to get an earful. I'll be nice, but I'm going to give you more than you probably bargained for. I'm not going to let you text my phone at 9 o'clock at night, and you're not going to get a passive response from me. I'm going to give you what's on my mind. And if you ask me a question, well, then that's on you, because you're going to get an earful. Okay. And I think anybody who knows me, of course, this person didn't know me. She knows me now because I told her who I was, but she was interested in what the church was. So I said, well, here, go to the website, find out about it. Anyway, this was the question. I'm not going to tell you the girl's name, and I'm not going to tell you the name of the organization that contacted me, but I'm going to tell you the question. And the reason why I'm pulling this one for this week is because it relates ultimately to what we're talking about tonight. And it's a question I do get from others on social media over the years. And so maybe let's answer it since it's relevant to tonight's topic on love. Okay? Prepare yourself, brace yourself. Some of you, all of you, might be offended. Probably not the regulars, because I think you know better by now, but we'll see how it goes, okay? Stick around. That's all I ask. Okay, if you're going to do this, stick around. Don't run off, okay? Draw the courage to stick around and listen to what I have to say and to really think about my answer, because I'm going to read you her question and I'm going to read you exactly verbatim the response I gave. So this was it. I'm going to just blot out the part where she identifies who she is, because she doesn't know I'm doing this, and I didn't ask if she was okay with it. Well, you texted my phone, so too bad. But I'm not going to, reveal who this is. Okay. So the question comes in from this political organization. We all know the country is divided, and we're interested in understanding why. I'd appreciate your thoughts on this. What do you think are the main things dividing us? It's like, boy, you really don't know who you're asking this question of, because this is something that I talk about all the time with my students. It's the central focus to a lot of my philosophical ramblings. Most of the time when you see me all pissed off on social media, it's usually something relating to this question. So, it comes up and, this is the answer I gave. And I want to maybe talk about this, and then we'll talk more about love, because ultimately it all sort of flows back into the same place. So I said, I would say the specific issues dividing the country are fundamental and ideological. This is specifically what makes it difficult or even impossible to resolve without serious conflict. Both conservative and liberal agendas are firmly rooted in the notion of being morally right, but they don't share the same definition of morality. The former wants to keep us locked forever in the dark ages, while the latter wants to tear everything down and rip anything apart that doesn't change at the rapid pace the liberal progressive agenda finds acceptable. The cause of this division is propaganda. Both conservative and liberal systems manipulate the public by appealing to their base primal animal primate instincts. The political establishment uses the core principles of behavioral psychology as a means to coerce the public to feel a certain way, the way they want them to. And it facilitates this unhealthy connection via the media, which is structured to spin facts according to each ideological perspective, as is suited to the agenda at hand. Most people are not aware enough, or even cognitively or emotionally intelligent enough to counter these tactics. So they buy deeper into them. And to assure that the connection is never broken, the political establishment uses fear and scare tactics. It's an old game. People love playing it because as long as they get emotionally pacified somehow, there's little interest in changing the corruption that causes the problem of division. Personal responsibility is conditioned out of most people by the third grade, and a people who live by the ideals of personal responsibility have little need to pay a collection of criminals, otherwise known as politicians, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to govern them. So in order to assure job security, the political establishment needs its people to be passive, weak, and fearful. Division is the only way to maintain this. So she comes back and says, "Thank you for that very thoughtful response. You are really making me think, and I like that. You mentioned that there is propaganda on both sides. I wonder if there's a news or media source that you do trust." And so I responded, "The only true media source I trust is personal observation. If I can't verify something myself, I typically ignore it. Local news isn't too horrible, but as soon as I start hearing opinions being reported as facts, I turn it off and go back to observing." Then she says, "I'd love to hear that you are an observer of your world. I wonder what you think might help to heal or connect people who are divided." And here's my answer to that. And I'll stop here because the conversation actually went on for 6 more hours, believe it or not. And I'm not going to read you everything, okay? But I want to read my response to that. So again, she asks, what do I think might help to heal or connect people who are divided? And here's how I answered it. In my estimation, healing of this sort can only come through one of 2 ways: violence or understanding. History has shown that a violent solution, i.e. civil war, brings a sort of functional unity over time when everyone has lost enough and grown tired enough that they become motivated to find new ways to work together. Obviously, that's not a desirous solution, so understanding is the better one, albeit not the most accessible. Understanding would require both sides of the spectrum to fully accept the other's position This is only achievable if both sides agree to accept being offended, insulted, disrespected, and marginalized. These sacrifices are not without their merits, however, because in a world where it is safe to speak one's mind, true communication can begin. We can't have that in a world where social media and MSN corporations conspire with the political establishment to censor and silence any speech their agenda disagrees with. But there is still the problem of who controls the course of understanding and decides which understanding to act upon. And this is where our system is collectively broken. Understanding requires us to no longer find our own identities within these ideological systems. We need to stop trying to control how others think and feel and teach them how to think and feel for themselves. Politics needs to take a backseat approach. The federal government should focus on national security and nothing else. The division will end when the government gives control back to the people and ceases mandating exclusionary ideologies. And I'm not talking about mandating masks and vaccines, although that's just a very small part of it. I'm talking about mandating the way we think. That is the problem. That's what causes division in the world. And that's why this world is severely lacking in love. Because where there is no freedom of consent, there can be no love. Do you understand that? Do you understand that that is just as much rape as physically going out there and sexually assaulting someone? It's the same damn thing. And yet all of us are being psychically raped. Not psychic in the paranormal sense, psychic in the psyche sense. We're being raped by the establishment to think the way they want us to think, to feel the way their agenda tells them to. And both sides are guilty. The conservatives are the good guys and the liberals are the bad guys to the conservatives. And to the liberals are the good guys and the conservatives are the bad guys. And they have their own morality. Neither one is a genuine morality. I wouldn't say either one has anything to do with Christian morality in the Judeo-Christian sense, but they all claim their own particular, they have their own claim to morality in whatever way they choose to define it. And they define it in radical ways because they're extremists. And extremism can have no freedom. You can't have a relationship without freedom. You see, this is why God does not impose himself on us. If you're wondering, where is he? The atheists are like, hey, well, if God really existed, he'd show himself by now. Oh, really? You think so? You think he's going to force his way into our lives just because he has a statement to make to prove that he exists? Any of us that have tried to find him have not failed in doing so. He's there. You're just not trying hard enough, but he's not going to force himself into this situation. That's not how God works because it's a free relationship. And that is why it is ultimate love. We need to start loving each other by accepting people where they're at, even in the most loathsome of ways, because that's what the church is required by God to do. You see, we're supposed to love the sinner as Christ loved the sinner. Which means that even when you find somebody completely reprehensible, you're still obligated to show them love. Not control them, not manipulate them, love them. We don't do that. That's why the world is divided. And that's why the United States of America is broken. Will it heal? Well, I mean, that's up to everyone, isn't it? It's up to everyone. Do you want to heal? Or do you like this darkness that you live within? It ends when you say it ends. You can't depend on the government because all they are is darkness. Right? That's all they know. Right? There's some of the worst people you will ever know in your life are politicians. And most of them are lawyers. So that tells you something about the legal field. It sucks. And it's manipulative. The whole legal system is built on manipulation. Winning lawsuits is built on manipulation. manipulating facts, manipulating laws, finding loopholes. And then these people become politicians and then do that at your expense. And then they manipulate the way you think and feel so that they can control every aspect of your life and make you think that you're free. You think you live in a democracy? You think you live in a constitutional republic? No. You live in a plutocratic, oligarchic corporatocracy. That's what you live within. It is the elite that control you, the elite that tell you what you're allowed to think and feel, and they use the media, which includes celebrities, to tell you. And that ebbs and flows with whatever the flavor of the decade happens to be. That's not love, folks. And I know that probably offended a whole bunch of people. Hopefully, not too many though. Hopefully, some of you are actually understanding what I'm saying because I'm trying to help you. Not trying to make you mad. I'm trying to help you to wake up and see what's really going on. The least of which is COVID-19 and all this other crap that's going on right now. The things that we could use as scapegoats for the division. Oh, that's just, they're symptoms of a greater problem. The masks, the vaccines, the COVID-19, the mandates, the lockdowns, they're just symptoms of a greater problem. The problem is people are lacking in love. And they don't know the meaning of the word unity. And they don't have a relationship with God. Tonight, hopefully, we can do our little small part in fixing that for at least some people, giving them a way to think that is for themselves. Because I'm not about controlling people. I'm about setting people free. And that's what the church is about. And that's what Christ came here to do. And that's really the core of salvation. You think it's about going to heaven? No. Salvation's not about going to heaven. It's about being set free from the captivity of your own sin. And in this context, I'm not talking about wrongdoing. And I'm not talking about making God angry, just like I said to Patti in the last hour. I'm talking about having a corrupted relationship with yourself. Setting you free means teaching you how to love yourself, teaching you how to love others, and being consistent and doing it effectively each time. That's what we're really talking about tonight. That's the real meaning of love. To help us continue to engage the conversation, we are joined by Father Chris. Hello, Father. How are you tonight?
Hello, I'm very well, thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
Good way to start your...
I'm ready to provide all of the answers to everything you've just said.
I'm sure, yes.
Comprehensive, that no one ever needs to question.
Well, you'll know the exact Bible verse that we need tonight. I know that.
Well, I have
already written down 5 of them.
I have actually written down one, because I want to begin with an apology, because although I am almost always right, obviously, just like all the politicians you just spoke about. Although I'm almost always right, I did when you mentioned the praying for the dead during the Maccabean revolt. I instantly gave the Bible verse, and I was a whole book out. I said 1 Maccabees 12:45, and it's 2 Maccabees.
2 Maccabees. Yeah, it's a mistake anybody could make. That's why I don't remember these things, because I know I'm going to get it wrong eventually.
I don't normally either. That's one of those ones, because I argue so often.
I don't think anyone went behind you and looked it up.
No, they probably didn't. I didn't hear anybody in the audience say,
I was just like, yeah, probably right.
See, those Catholics, they don't know their Bibles.
I'm perfectly happy to correct myself, and so I'm not always right. So I thought I'd begin with that.
Well, they wouldn't be able to look it up anyway, because actually the Bible thumpers don't even have Maccabees in their Bible. So
no, well, that's true. It's true. Yeah. They threw out all the verses that didn't agree with their theology.
That's right.
It's not in the Bible, it can't be true. And we went, well, it is in the Bible. We went, oh, we better get that out.
That's right.
In the Bible.
Well, Father, and in light of what I just, talked about, and, some of the things that I've been alluding to all night is that, there are in ancient Greek, 8, perhaps even more, but there's 8 primary words for love. The English language has 1, love. And so it's like, I tell people all the time, it's like, we use this so frivolously. I love my wife. I love my child. I love my mom and dad. I love God.
English people are very good at, because they're so awkward about speaking about their feelings. We're very good at using alternative words for love. So although they're not formal words for love like you're describing in Greek, I think we do use different.
I think we use different expressions, but we'll say I love my dad just as easily as we'll say I love this restaurant or I love pizza.
Oh, sure. No, that's right.
And we probably should not be using the word love for trivial things like restaurants and pizza as much as we might adore these places. Even then, adore is like, adoration. It's a divine thing, right? It's not, we're very frivolous with our language in the vernacular. And I think that subconsciously plays into a reduced understanding that the ancient Greeks perhaps, took for granted because it was so already built within their language. And we have really very little concept of that. So yeah, it's true to an extent what you're saying, that we're good about expressing it, perhaps in a way that everyone knows what we're talking about. And we clearly know when we say I love pizza that you're not referring to an emotion that you have towards your spouse. Hopefully not anyway. Maybe you do. I don't know. I think though that subconsciously it does have a sort of negative impact on our comprehension and perhaps leads us into these problems. And I'm going to give an example tonight. Okay. So one of the words for love is one that I think a lot of people actually already know, and they might not even realize it. It's philia. And we use this in psychology because when we talk about the paraphilias, we're talking about expressions of sexuality that deviate from the norm. Okay, so any kind of a fetish, perhaps in a sense that's not typical sexual behavior of an average person, that could be labeled or diagnosed as a paraphilia. And the biggest paraphilia that everyone has heard of is pedophilia. Okay, right. That's a big one. The problem is it's not even using the Greek word correctly, because the word philia actually means affectionate love. We are supposed to have a philia towards children. We're supposed to be affectionate towards children, even children that are not our own. It should have been called pedoeros, which is the sexual passionate love that is not appropriate for a person to have with a child. I know
a lot of people prefer to use the term pederast. That's for one for those who commit abuses against children.
Yes.
For that exact reason, because pedophilia is not a good
term.
Descriptor.
No. Yeah. But that shows us two words in the Greek, ancient Greek language: eros, which is the romantic, passionate, sexual, lustful, or even love; pleasurable love, love that provides pleasure. So sexual activity would fall into eros, and philia is affectionate. That's supposed to be the friendly love, the love between friends. And then there is storge, which is familiar love. This is love between family members. So even the Greeks had a special word for the love that you'd have with family versus love that you'd have towards your friends. They saw those as different types of love. And it is, when you think about it. There's mania. Not necessarily a healthy love, but a love in the Greek context nonetheless. This is obsessive love. When love turns into a type of obsessive behavior, so extreme jealousy, codependent behaviors, even violent and controlling behaviors could all be characterized as mania, because even though they're not really technically loving acts, the person who commits them might actually relate to love that way and only that way. That's kind of why mania is used in a psychological context to associate it as a mental illness. Then there's ludus. I hope I'm pronouncing that one correct. I think it's pronounced ludus, which is playful love. This was seen as puppy love. They even had a word for puppy. We call it puppy love, which I guess we do have a way of designating it. But when like two children kind of have an affection for each other that's special, but obviously it's not eros, and they're not brothers and sisters or even friends. So that, I mean, it's more than friendship. They said, well, there's a word for that one too, a type of love, and it's its own kind of love. And if you ever felt puppy love, I know I did when I was a kid. I had classmates that I was interested in, but not in the same way that a person in college perhaps is interested in someone of the opposite sex. But it feels different. It's a different kind of emotion that you experience, but it's still love. And the last two are pragma, which is enduring love. This is love that is built on a commitment. So this could actually be a love that could exist between a mentor and a protege. That it's a more of a working relationship. So it might turn into friendship. It could even evolve into an eros at some point, but it starts out as as pragma. It is its own type of relationship, but it's a loving relationship. And the last one is philotia, I believe is how it's pronounced, and that's self-love, love of oneself. And I would say philotia is the word. Philotia is the one that is perhaps responsible for the majority of the problems in the world today, because I would say that the first person that you must know how to love in order to love anyone at all is yourself. And most people are subconsciously self-loathing. If it's not the way that they don't like their body, the way their body looks, or they're too self-critical, they lack confidence, they don't think highly of themselves, or that I could never do that. I could never succeed at that. I'm afraid to fail. All of these is a lack of self-love, and it kind of branches out into deeper problems that we don't even realize we're doing, but it is central to this one thing. And this is how the ancient Greeks saw it too. Plato, he saw it this way. Even I added platonic love, love that is without any kind of physical involvement. But and getting back to the nature of self-love, I would say that that's where most of these problems begin. So, Father, I'd like to hear your thoughts on all this tonight. I know I just threw a whole lot at you.
Sure. Did I miss you say agape love as well?
You haven't got to agape. That's okay. The primary one. We'll get to that in a minute.
That's fine. No, that makes sense. Makes sense.
I skipped that one because that one's probably going to take us another hour to talk about.
We'll get there. Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. So look, I mean, there's a few things I want. Just to reply to your remarks to the political SMSs.
See, you don't know how lucky you guys have it out there in the UK and Australia. You don't get these like we do. We're inundated with politics all the time.
In Australia, they are the only category of people who are allowed to do that, but they generally don't. It's mainly for government notifications that they can,
like emergencies to tell everybody something. Yeah,
but there's actually only one party that does it, and they've kind of made a bit of a spoof of it. They do it so much because what they're saying is, we're doing this because we think it should be illegal, so we're going to keep doing it. So I kind of like that.
It would be better
anyway. But it's an interesting question that they asked you. Of course, they led you along that, are we getting more divided? Well, of course, and everyone's going to say yes to that question. That's a leading question.
Well, to be fair, the organization, and again, I don't want to give the name out, but the organization actually is a political organization within the United States that studies the recent political divisiveness that has sort of erupted over the last several years, and they are claimed to be working to resolve it. Now, whether or not, I take special interest groups with a grain of salt. Most of the time, they're nothing but trouble. But that's what they claim.
Well, they have one special interest at their
themselves.
Yes.
But sorry, I am a libertarian as well, in case nobody can tell. This idea of unity is, I think, a deliberate deception that's going on at the moment. Now, you mentioned some things about that. You talked about the different ways of achieving some, getting over a disruption within the nation. The one being civil war, the other one being sort of working towards understanding. And of course, one is a very fast but brutal solution. The other is a very slow solution. And of course, there are times in history where war is the sort of least bad option. I don't think we can ever say it's a good option, but I think we can say I'm not a pacifist, and there have been occasions in history when war has been the least bad option. You see, what a lot of the time people mean by unity is, how can we reach a point where you all agree with me? You see,
that's what they want.
That's one way to achieve unity, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I'll cudgel you until you all agree with me,
right?
And then we'll have unity. Which of course completely flies in the face of diversity. Mm-hmm. And of course, diversity, as that I do take an interest in American politics, and so I do. I watch the Daily Wire and and Fox and CNN and look at how they choose to report things.
That's what they're doing. I didn't realize it was reporting.
No, it's an editorial show.
Yeah.
Well, they're reporting their opinion. So
they're reporting their opinions.
But this kind of push for diversity is diversity of everything apart from opinion. So it's all the sort of visible, or even if they're invisible, the sort of, LGBTQ, black, white, Asian, the things that are actually quite easy, I think, to focus on. But there's no recognition of diversity of opinion. For example, I'll give you a quick example. Everyone's talking about at the moment. So Joe Biden has said, I'm gonna have a Supreme Court nomination, and it's going to be a black woman. Okay. Now, it's interesting that anybody else in America that chose to say such a thing would actually be guilty of a crime in restricting who they're going to allow to have a job to immutable characteristics. But I'm not even interested in that. Let's leave that to one side. If that were true, if they were his criteria, then can we expect him to pick a conservative black woman? Is it going to be Candace Owens that he picks to be on the Supreme Court? No, it's not, because he doesn't want that kind of diversity in terms of his own, so the whole thing is just a farce. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that approach to unity, we'll have representative democracy, then we'll be unified. Bullshit. That won't happen. What they mean, what are meant by politics.
Because you know what would happen, Father? Let's pretend in some weird, Twilight Zone that were to actually happen. They'll start fighting amongst themselves. Eventually, they'll find things to disagree with within their inner circles. So they'll never be the unity that they.
By the way,
that happens now.
I'm very aware. I've just been whipping Democrats. I agree with you. It doesn't matter which side of politics you pick.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the current president. So that this administration's obviously a Democrat, liberal
but I'm not
administration.
So, in that regard,
no, thank you for qualifying that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, but the problem is a theological problem. Jordan Peterson has said this. He said this in multiple interviews. The problem is a theological problem, and unfortunately, of course, we've reduced theology to being sort of that thing that those weird Christians do, whereas actually it's so let's talk about unity. You mentioned the devil, for example, earlier on as well. Philosophically, theologically, we would say God is the great unifying force of the cosmos. Okay, so God is, because all things emanate from God. He creates all things. All things are contingent on God. The prime mover, all of those philosophical things that Thomas Aquinas would say, for example. He's the great unifying force. And therefore, if we want to act towards unity, we have to act towards God. The devil, of course, is not an opposite force to God, because he's not equal to God. But nevertheless, the word that's used for the devil is diabolos, which means the divider. So where we have, on the one hand, the great unifier, who is God, we have the great divider, who is the devil. And so that's why, when Patti speaks about, positivity and, and all of that infectious kind of positivity that she has, which is so endearing, that the kernel of truth within that is that if we are orientating ourselves towards the source of all goodness, who we know to be God, then we are at least attempting to cooperate with a unifying act. So, in other words, we're on a path to unity while ever we cooperate with the will of God, which is what goodness is.
Yes.
Does that make some sense?
It does. And I think you're kind of getting us to agape, almost.
Yeah. And so by the way, we don't prearrange this show.
No, there's no script.
No, sure don't.
Just like Ghost Adventures, there's no script.
No, we don't need to. But also, I do want to pick you upon something that you said that I don't quite agree with.
Okay.
Which is always more fun, isn't it?
Oh yeah, sure.
Although I suspect that I'm really only going to say something that you really do agree with, which is.
It might have been some inadequacy in how I conveyed it, but let's see.
Sure. Well, I think the suggestion was that sin was somehow cooperation with the devil, or sin was evil. That was right. It was the kind of connection between sin and evil, which on one hand I can understand, but I mean, to be very technical about it, sin means to miss the mark. So it's an archery term that's used by St. Paul, for example, in the New Testament, which means, when you're shooting an arrow towards a target and you don't hit the target.
Right.
So in other words, sin is not necessarily about, setting out to perform an evil act. It's about failing to perfectly love, and so. Which
I could say, I mean, we could get philosophical about that and say that technically that's what evil is. I mean, if you define evil as the absence of good, it is entirely missing the mark, because the mark is to be good.
Well, I think to say that evil is the absence of goodness is also philosophical. Well, it's theologically problematic. So I'm not entirely sure I hold to that view. I think, and this goes back to Genesis. So, God creates all things and he sees that they're good. And the totality of all that he has created, he sees as very good.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the argument is that actually for things to have existence at all, they must contain goodness.
Right.
And so, with that in mind, pure evil would cease to exist, because it would have no goodness within it. Evil sees far more pernicious than that. That's why, and I've said it earlier on in the comments, it's not good enough to only have good intentions, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's
a shaky line though, because, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong, but where my thought went next when you said that was, then wouldn't demons be redeemable?
Sure. Well, so I'll answer that in just a second.
Okay.
In fact, I'll answer that first. No, demons are not redeemable, because demons were angels.
Right.
And therefore, their rejection of God
is absolute.
With full knowledge.
Was complete. Yeah.
It's absolute. Yeah.
Whereas our rejection of God is never with full knowledge. It can't be. And so no, demons are not redeemable. But in order to define evil, I prefer the definition of evil as to say it's a deliberate cooperation with destruction. So to act badly means just not to do the right thing necessarily, or not to be entirely good, not to love perfectly, whether it's filial love, whether it's, erotic love, whatever it may be, we can be bad, and that's to be sinful as well, and we can miss the mark, and we can be bad. To be evil is to set out to destroy that which is good. So evil is the intention to destroy goodness. And in that context, that's why the serpent in the garden is described as evil.
Right.
Because the intention is to destroy goodness.
So then where would you say is the goodness in them then? I mean, if things would, if we're going to operate from the basis, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong, but if we're going to operate from the basis that in order for something to exist, there has to be something good, which makes sense if you're qualifying creation along the lines, and that the creative principle is indeed completely an expression of love, which is the divine force, and we talked about that extensively in the first hour, then how do we arrive at something like Lucifer, Satan, as an angelic being that is existing, however irredeemable, and well, I don't particularly see the goodness in him outside of the potential that once was, that's no longer. So
it became self-serving. So it's easy for me. Love, goodness, it's used to serve others, whereas evil is only used to serve yourself.
Right.
But also philosophically, you did mention this, which is so important, and I think I said it last week as well, certainly on a previous show, which is, although love, and the greatest of these is love, and I said this in the comments, because in the glory of the beatific vision, there'll be no need for hope anymore. Our hopes will be realized. There'll be no need for faith. We'll see God's face to face.
Yeah,
that's right.
There will be love. Love will abide.
That continues.
Yes.
And so that's why the greatest of these is love. But there is
always
an a priori condition to love. So, and that condition is freedom.
Right.
Yep. It must be free.
And I think a lot of the time when people speak about love, even, and I'm not suggesting, evil motives at all, but it's tempting to think about love as, somebody loves me if they're nice to me, or I love somebody if I'm nice to them, if they stroke my hair, if they make me feel good. Well, we know that cannot be a sufficient condition of love. Because in fact, you could pay somebody to stroke your hair or to stroke something else. So
he's not wrong.
No, it's true. Depends on which ancient Greek word you're using. I mean,
well, that's right. That's true.
Let me get down the list here.
Yeah, I think we know which one it is, but
it's not agape, if you're wondering.
But I think what I mean by freedom being a priori to love is not merely some nice theological thing I read in a book, but it's to say that in order to love somebody, you have to first acknowledge that they're not you.
Right.
So that in fact whole and entire amongst themselves as their own created. Their own being, created in the image and likeness of God, exists, Sister Mary Joan. Okay? Independent of me, whether I exist or not, Sister Mary Joan is a person, a human being, a rational soul, created in the image and likeness of God. Okay? Now, only by acknowledging her otherness to me, and her dignity as a created being of God, can I then, once I've acknowledged that she is completely free, only then can I, as another completely free, creating the image and likeness of God, interact with her. Once I've acknowledged that, then I'm offering filial love if I encourage her in prayer and in hope. So. That recognition that another person does not exist for your ends.
Yes.
And all of the great disasters in relationships happen because that either gets lost or was never acknowledged in the first place.
Well, they're always comparing their new love to their last love.
Yeah.
And it's hard to differentiate, you're doing just what my ex did. Well, I'm not your ex. Quit assuming I'm doing this because your ex did it. So we're terrible at that.
I'm going to posit something to kind of bring us a little bit back to the start of this discussion, which was you posited rather that in order that evil is, you don't like the philosophical notion that evil is the negation of good. And you explain why that's problematic for you.
I think it's the attempt to destroy goodness.
Right. Yeah. So could we say then that the reason, and this is something that I can say is metaphysically definitively true, because I have experienced this one. Obviously, this is something that a lot of people are going to have to take my word for it, because most of you are not going to be encountering evil the way I've encountered evil in my life because of the work that I do. But the one thing I can say definitively, and I've taught this and I continue to teach this because it is the single most powerful solution to resolving the problems that I deal with professionally in terms of people that are afflicted with evil in various ways, is that evil and Satan himself has no power outside of the power that we give him.
Right.
So could it be, Father, that you are correct, that evil is, or in a sense, we're both correct, because maybe evil is the negation of good, the antithesis in the sense that doesn't exist. It's just the absence of it. But the reason it is a thing is because we project energy from our own nature into it through the misdirection of sin, and that we empower it to exist. That if we were to unanimously all say, let's say we get everybody in the world to agree, which will never happen, but let's just say we were, let's live in a utopia for a moment, and we get everyone in the world to unanimously end sin. We're all going to take up the life of the Virgin Mother. Okay. Where would Satan be? He would no longer exist. There would be no power to feed him. Nothing to.
Well, he would be anathema, anathematized, as the church understands it. I mean,
and is that not hell? Is that not hell? The fires of Gehenna, I've always interpreted that to be more than just an analogy of burning like Dante's Inferno. I've interpreted it to be annihilation, the removing of the trash. You're getting rid of it. You're not throwing it there to do anything other than to remove this. It's not useful. And then the parable of the weeds and the wheat even further reinforces that same concept of eradication of these things. So in my mind, perhaps what we see as demons are merely just shadows of things that once were, that are no longer truly existent, but we, through our power of creation and bastardizing our being made in the image of God, the ability to create, are able to bring these things back to life for a moment to wreak havoc through sin.
Well, I think that to go deeper still,
we're pretty deep already.
Yeah. I was worried I was being too esoteric, but hey, let's jump in.
Well, and in fact, to make it less ethereal.
Okay.
Because one of the comments says ethereal love, all-encompassing love. Well, actually, there's a word that was used by Patti and by you in the first half, which is really important. The word is tangible. Mm-hmm. Making things tangible. Now, the one being in creation we've not mentioned yet is Jesus Christ. And I know this is a bit kind of, it's like, Sunday school, the answer's always Jesus. But in the God-man, we actually see the antidote to evil. And so there is the significance of the life, the passion, the resurrection of Jesus Christ can't be ignored in this discussion, because we either talk about a world that existed before the incarnation, or we talk about what happened in the incarnation, or we talk about what we would call the end times, post resurrection of Jesus. Because in Jesus, love is fulfilled, evil is defeated, but also revealed at the same time. And so, I know we're getting to the top of the hour, but I'll just say this was actually echoed by, again, Jordan Peterson when he spoke for 4 hours with Joe Rogan last week.
Look, I've been getting my Jordan Peterson injections too. He's a fascinating fellow.
But there's nothing new about this idea. I mean, this is
but he just articulates it so well.
Yeah.
Of course. And it's why the Orthodox love him so much, actually, because he really is, anyway, I'll just say it rather than talk about it. But Jesus is the tangible evidence of God's love, and what that love is all conquering of fear, and that's because Jesus persevered with all of the trials that the world can throw at us. So, even if you are not a believer in the resurrection of Jesus, which is what makes someone a Christian, even the story itself, it shows a character who has suffered every evil that can be thrown at a person, every trial. So he's betrayed by his friends. Judas betrays him, and all of the others run away from him as well. I mean, everyone around him, apart from the women and his Blessed Mother, and St. John, abandoned him at the cross. He's rejected by his own people. So he's in an occupied country, and his own people turn him over.
Rejected.
He's a criminal is preferred. Someone who everyone knows is a criminal is preferred over him by his own people. He has been the best person possible, going around doing wonderful things for healing the sick, exorcising demons, power over nature, calming the sea, all the rest. The most virtuous man ever, and yet put to death in the cruelest manner possible.
And he was innocent.
So gaze at the life of Christ. We want to understand goodness and evil. If we want to understand love, look at the life of Christ. So there is the man betrayed, rejected, cursed for all the world to see on a cross, hanging on a tree is a curse in the Old Testament.
Right.
The ultimate non-kosher way to kill a Jew. There's the most cursed man on the tree, and yet behold, the most blessed man that ever lived, the most loving man. Not in spite of that, all of those evils that beset him, but actually in fulfillment of all of those evils that beset him. And so that kind of positivity that Patti was speaking about, yes, that can sometimes come from a sort of outward charismatic energy that we put out into things, but also in the figure of Christ, we see a different kind of charism, the charism of taking all things upon himself and drawing all men to himself. So that actually, unlike where Nietzsche says, if you stare into the abyss stares back at you. In Christ on the cross, we stare into the abyss and love stares back at us.
And that gets us into the last and most profound of the Greek concepts of love, which is agape. And I always tell people, if you don't understand agape, if you struggle with the definitions of agape, because they're all inadequate, it can sometimes be as simple as comparing it to compassion, to unconditional love. But all of these are very lacking. And I tell people, if you really want to understand this, all you have to do is read John 3:16, because that captures agape very concisely, very succinctly, and without anything lacking. It's just perfect. And if for those who don't know it, I'll read it for you. For God so loved the world, love in this sense, agape, okay? For God so loved the world that he gave his only son so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. And what makes that agape over perhaps any of the other kinds of love that we've discussed tonight is that it's unconditional, because conditionally we don't deserve it. Conditionally we deserve to perish. That's the consequence of sin. And yet, because he loves us, he does this anyway. That's agape. And we can actually project that to others too. We're not confined to one of the human sorts, philia and all these other ones. We can be unconditional. And in fact, I would say that's what we should all be striving for. I would say all the other forms of love are merely just expressions of this one. But they're all incomplete expressions if you combine them all.
And it's a perfect symmetry to what I was just describing, because of course John 3:16 comes after, Jesus said, Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert.
Yes, it does.
And so the Son of Man will be lifted up. And again, Jordan Peterson spoke about this as aversion therapy, that So the Israelites are scared of the snakes in the desert. Stare at a snake and get over your fear.
Right.
You know? And hearing Christ, all the worst things that could possibly happen to us in life have happened to this man.
Yeah.
Stare at him.
Yeah.
Gaze at him.
Find your
And then
courage.
see the blessedness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Father. That was a fantastic way of putting it. We're going to go to our next break here. We'll be back for the third part and final part of tonight's show. We'll be taking your questions and comments and stories from the chat room as well as from callers. And maybe even Patti Negri will rejoin us. We don't know. Hey, anything's possible in a world that practices love. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the final part of Vestiges After Dark. We're still talking about love, and particularly how it relates to things like sin, evil, even goodness, unity, all these concepts that sort of plug into the same reality somehow. We're trying to piece it together for you. The discussion continues after this. One of the oldest, I guess, debates that occurred in the early church was about the very subject that we have been discussing tonight, and that is the origin of evil. It's been the problem of evil is what it's really referred to in theology, but it has some interesting connections to earlier concepts that predate the Judeo-Christian worldview as we understand it today. A lot of it comes from Plato, but I was trying to find St. Augustine's actual statement, and I found it during the break. I spent the break looking for that, and this is what he said about it, and it does indeed, as Father Chris indicated, contrast with how Thomas Aquinas relates goodness and being to being the same thing. So St. Augustine wrote, "For what is that which we call evil except the absence of good? In the bodies of animals, disease and wounds mean nothing but the absence of health. For when a cure is effected, that does not mean that the evils which were present, namely the disease and wounds, go away from the body and dwell elsewhere. They altogether cease to exist. For the wound or disease is not a substance, but a defect in the fleshly substance, the flesh itself being a substance, and therefore something good, of which those evils, that is, privations of the good, which we call health, are accidents. Just in the same way, we are called vices in the soul. What are called vices in the soul are nothing but privations of natural good, and when they are cured, they are not transferred elsewhere. When they cease to exist in the healthy soul, they cannot exist anywhere else." That's the basis from which St. Augustine developed this notion of the problem of evil and how he explains it. But I think where it gets to a little bit of where I was trying to go, perhaps what we're calling evil, at least in terms of its existent nature, is not so much that it has goodness, that it just appears to exist as long as we that are good, fundamentally at least, by being made in God's image, can project it, at least for a period of time.
or even instantiate it.
Yes.
You know, I mean, you know, we can do evil things.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
But we can do them because we're created in goodness. You know, so it is the corruption of our goodness that in other words, that's why it's such a vice.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were created for a different purpose. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, this is extended, of course, in theology to things like alcoholism, that, you know, that substances, things cannot be evil or good, you know, but the way they interact with people can make them evil or good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, because of free will.
There was a monk that when I was exploring monasticism and almost 2 steps away from becoming a Carthusian, if you can believe it. So different from the life I live now, quite the opposite of a Carthusian's life, I think, being on television and doing shows like this. But
or even speaking.
I think I talk too much to be a Carthusian, to be honest. I mean, I'd be going a little crazy in my head.
Your hands would be all over the place.
They would.
You still speak with your hands.
I do. But when I was, this was in a Cistercian monastery at the time, so not quite as severe as the Carthusians, but we would get into some very interesting conversations, and a lot of them were very well versed in esotericism, to the point that I would say that most monasteries behind the cloister actually have a pretty good library and concept of esoteric ideas, including Gnosticism and some things that are considered forbidden for conventional talk. I mean, these are not things they teach from the pulpit. They're not things that they even teach at all, but they're things that really elicit wonderful discussions at night over a wonderful cognac, for example. And so we would be sitting around with a cognac. Monks love cognac. And where we were just engaging in thought. And one of the monks mentioned to me that there's an old esoteric notion that stated that the reason we have the devil as we know him in the New Testament, which is such a very, if you really pay attention, a very different character than what we have in the Old Testament.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This Old Testament, devil, not even a devil, really, more like a member of God's court. He's an accuser.
Yes.
Yeah. Kind of like does, tries to find the fault in you. And he's kind of like he's the one that works for God that tries to get to the heart of what's real about you. Serving God's will, not working in contrast to it, serving God's will. When you look at Job, you see the exchange. It's a perfect example of this. Even though there's other places, and of course, the serpent in the Garden of Eden has been associated with Satan as well. It's different. It's still different. Even that's different than what we get in the New Testament, where it's fully personified in the form of the devil as we know him. This is where we start to see real demonic activity that converses, and an actual tempter that, tries to sway Jesus in the desert and all that type of thing. And so this monk told me that there's an old, very old esoteric tradition, probably stems somewhere from the Gnostics. I don't know. It just sounds like something Gnostics would have come up with. And sometimes when they came up with something, it was actually pretty good. It just got rooted out because of everything else they said that the church didn't like, so they just threw it all out, kind of like the baby out with the bathwater. So the good stuff didn't get retained as well. Fortunately, we're getting like the Nag Hammadi, and things are being discovered all the time, so we are able to kind of dive in a little bit into that world again, and finding some good stuff there. But this is what he told me. He said the reason that happened was because the devil fundamentally changed when Jesus incarnated man, because Jesus could not sin. Even though he could freely choose, he was not without freedom. His freedom was so perfect, he would always choose the right thing, which he did. So he was sinless, right? Jesus was without sin. Perfect man, perfect God, 100% man, 100% God. The two natures are there, but he encompasses the perfect aspect of our nature, what we could live in potential.
Because he had only one person.
Yes. Yeah.
Two natures, but one person.
Two natures, but one person. Exactly. Yeah. So the two natures, okay, man and God. But the man was perfect, and there is no man that is. So what happened to human nature when something that profound incarnated it? Fractured. And so what we have is this personified devil, which is the antithesis of the action of Jesus incarnating. Why the devil now is this beastly, horrific thing, no longer working under God's court or under his will, no longer serving God's will, but doing his own thing, complete antithesis to Jesus, but without any power of his own, only using temptation and manipulation to obtain power from others. That it occurs at the same time that Jesus comes into the picture. So this old esoteric, I'm not saying it's true, but I am saying it's a viable.
I think it is.
You did? What's that? What?
I think it is.
I think it is. I think
it makes complete sense.
I'm trying to be a little bit respectful to any conventionalists out there that don't like what I'm saying, but I agree with you. And I have taught this to my students as well. They know what I'm talking about. But that's why it transitioned and changed.
We all have to confront Christ. Look, sorry, atheists listening, you will confront Christ one day. Or beyond days, I should say. So we'll all have to confront Christ. So did the devil. Yeah. And the confrontation is detailed in the Gospels. It was something that could have been expected and anticipated. There is one principle that unites the action of the devil in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it's his utter revulsion at how that God loves humans as much as he loves the angels. So, from his perspective, because it's warped, more than he loves the angels, because he gives them freedom.
Yeah.
And he gives them the ability to procreate. This is, so this is again, the ancients tell us that Lucifer fell from heaven because he couldn't cope with, and the demons that followed him, they couldn't cope with the idea that human beings would be given this ability that angels don't have.
Yeah, he felt kind of betrayed.
To co-create with God, and then in the New Testament, the idea that God would seek to redeem man by becoming man, the new Adam. Mm-hmm. That's utterly consistent, in terms of the devil's hatred towards God and towards us.
Yeah.
It's because God loves us.
Yeah. Yeah. Agape, again, which is why I bring it up, because we're getting closer and closer, and I don't think we can just give a definition of agape and be done with it like I did with the other 7 terms from ancient Greek. I think agape is more of a conceptual thing. It is more ethereal, and as we've said, as the theme tonight, let's make things tangible. How do we make agape tangible? It's difficult, but we can do it conceptually through tangible ideas and tangible events, and certainly the incarnation, the dying on the cross.
But it is also where it interacts with politics, which is what you were talking about earlier on.
Yeah.
But not party politics and not ideological politics.
Yeah.
But the way it's laid out in Matthew, the sheep and the goats.
Yeah.
I was in prison and you visited me. I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. Not that I was naked and you phoned the government and said you should send some clothes to this person.
Or raise the taxes to an unreasonable amount so that we can pay for it all.
Yeah, let's make sure everybody has clothes by stealing from people. So, but that, because that is that's why taxation's not love.
Right. Well, that's why those policies are not
for love, and it's not.
That's why those policies are not charity. They're not Christian charity, because it's basically what it is. It's taking all the responsibility off for you and pushing it off into where so you don't have to think about it.
Yeah. Because the word charity, of course, is from caritas, which is Latin for love.
Yes.
And so I also had a theory that it's actually the root word of the word chasuble. We cover our authority, the stole, with charity.
That's interesting. I actually did not know that. That's actually interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
I might be wrong, but that's what I've been told by someone who's cleverer than I am. Yeah. And that's most people. So, but I think that is where politics does get it wrong. Because you know, look at the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan's good because he helps that person. He pays for his lodging. He says if he needs any more money, I'll come and give you more. You know, there's it's a personal intervention. Out of agape, out of love, and an anonymous government that redistributes wealth. Although the effect might look the same. A man being helped from the ground, a man being clothed, a man being fed. I'm being very misogynistic, but you know, you get the thread. I don't worry about these things. You know, although the result might look the same, it's not the same.
Well,
result.
it's like in the Acts. It's like in the early chapters of the Acts of the Apostles. You know, it sounds very socialistic in the sense that, you know, they all came and they lived communally. Nobody had personal possessions. If somebody came into the community, they would give everything they have to the entire community, and it would be distributed as needed. And even
free choice.
Yes, but that's the difference. It's by free choice. It's not being enforced or required by some higher authority. You are coming into this community freely and operating freely through the expectation of how the community lives. So you knew what you were doing when you got into it, which is why Paul has that, Peter has that little rift with the couple that retains, and they end up dead because they didn't give everything. They retained a little bit for themselves. I forget their names. You Father, you know them. You probably know it better than I.
Yeah,
they're escaping me at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, well, is it Aquila and
something with an S, wasn't it?
Oh God, it's too late at night for Bible for me. But I think you know the story, and I think anyone that knows Acts of the Apostles knows that one because it's a powerful moment. They die out of their actions to withhold things for themselves.
Well, they purposely did it too.
Yes, and that's it. It's like you knew what you were doing when you came into this community. You knew the standards of this community.
They try to be sneak about it.
And that doesn't work with God because everything's revealed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing.
And it wasn't because it was because they were dishonest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't because they had things. It was because they were dishonest.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And yes, because I mean, I've always said, it's like, you know, God doesn't have a problem with wealth.
Marina has helped us. I knew she would. Ananias and Sapphira.
There, thank you. Thank you. Ananias. Yes, thank you. That's it. Yes, Sophia. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
chat room.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much. I just couldn't. What was it again? Sapphira. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sapphira.
I knew one began with an A. You knew one began with an A.
I had the S.
Too late at night for this kind of stuff. Oh my goodness. Right. But yes, I mean it is absolutely a mark of freedom. That's what distinguishes the difference, and it's an act of love because it is free. Free love is always free. That's what makes rape, and you know, sex between consenting adults. Beautiful. That's the difference, because in one case it's self-serving, it's manipulative, it's selfish, it's harmful, it's destructive.
It's a destruction of something made for goodness. Made
for goodness, yes. Right. It's the ultimate insult to the very power of God himself. I mean, the sexual act is the power of creation. It is no less than the power of God in our own bodies. And you know, I would actually argue that making sex a dark and dirty thing in a puritanical sense is just as bad as people who are careless and
it's also why separating sex from procreation is so dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
And you know, this isn't to defend people saying you've got to have 20 babies. I'm not, you know,
which not practical.
Not
no one who's had a
especially.
child would say that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not about that, but to separate it from the potential for that is to denature it.
Yes, and it's sad that we live that our world has moved in such a way that away from the will of God that this is an issue, because it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a situation where raising more than one or two children, if even that, is so prohibitively expensive and challenging and difficult that it would put such great hardship on a family that it would be signing a contract to become destitute.
Although, as an aside, I can't imagine it's harder today than it was in 1930. But
probably not 1930, but I would say it was probably a lot easier in the 1800s and prior to that, because
you had people helping each other out a lot more back then too.
Well, we had more of a
to survive, and right.
That's true. You know, families now particularly in the West,
raising the village, the village raising the child concept.
Well, it's interesting that in the West, you know, child rearing is down, and in the East it's up in some places, not in all places. China just recently, I guess, raised their limit, so clearly they're noticing a trend.
That's because they're in massive economic problems if they don't.
Yeah, exactly. Everything comes down to money with
Marxism.
Yeah, with Marxism.
Well, they're going to need soldiers soon. That's why.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But the thing is,
let's just cut to the chase.
But the thing is, in the West, it's down considerably, and it's interesting that the West is very individualistic. You know, it's how many times you hear parents joking, maybe not so much, but trying to make it a joke that, you know, when you're 18, you're getting the hell out of here. You know, it's like this mentality. Push them out as soon as they're 18. You go live your own life. I'm reclaiming mine. And then you see them these empty nesters with the bumper sticker on the back of the car that says things like "I'm spending my children's inheritance." Right. There's a very strong, even if it's in jest, there's some element of truth to it. There's a strong individualism and an unhealthy version of it. I'm not talking about, individualism is a wonderful thing, but not at the expense of the various requirements of love that are still part of the human community.
And that's gone hand in hand with the fact, with the loss of faith, because the closest expression of the church is the family. Or is the home,
right?
The domestic church. You don't have to have a family, but it's the domestic church. Then you have the local church, which is the diocese, and the universal church, which is simultaneous.
Yeah.
And so, but within my family, I certainly didn't have a domestic church. I didn't grow up in a religious household at all.
Yeah.
And so, and that's far more typical now. It was typically my generation, especially in Europe. In America, you were a bit more, slower to throw that in the garbage, but you're getting there. I certainly didn't have that great, and of course, our children's generation, maybe there'll be a resurgence, who knows? But it's certainly. What's become the domestic church has been politics, and a real crappy form of politics too, an unthinking, uncritical.
Well, it's become a belief system. I didn't go into the rest of that. Like I said, that text conversation that I talked about last segment was a 6-hour. It went on for 6 hours back and forth with this individual and asking me more questions. And one of the questions, she did ask, what was it? It's escaping me now. It's gone. It'll come back. But, I think one of the fundamental problems as we move forward in religion, is that you can't have your cake and eat it too. There's going to be sacrifice involved. It's intrinsic to the process. It's required for spiritual development. There is no spiritual development without.
It doesn't matter what your religion is.
It doesn't.
Because that's certainly true of Judaism. It's certainly true of Islam.
It is.
Which I know more, and Hinduism. I know more about those than others. But I can't, I can't imagine a religious system that hasn't hasn't had sacrifice at the heart of it.
I
Because it's
found the thing I was trying to find. I mean, she asked me about climate change, and I gave what I thought was a fairly intelligent response. She wanted to know my thoughts. She just said, "What are your thoughts on climate change?" And I said, "Well, I'm very cautious with so-called professionals that have a platform, particularly when they're paid by the government but not elected. I'm very, very cautious and cynical and skeptical about anything that they say. Is the climate changing? Absolutely. Is it a deviation as the result of intervention of man to a point that it is irreversible or reaching a point of irreversibility? That's the question. And there's different scientists that say different things. And of course, just like with everything else, the mainstream has the platform, and they silence anybody that deviates from it, which is not science, by the way. That's exactly the opposite of how science is supposed to work. Right. So I gave that answer. I said, yes, I believe that the climate is changing. I am cautious with people who are quick to just say that it's all carbon emissions, that, we did have 5...
And whether we should do anything about it or not.
Right. Well, we did have 5 ice ages long before we had any industrialization. Yeah. So clearly, the ebb and flow of the planet is a known process, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying, if you're asking me about climate change, this is where my mind's at right now. I need to hear more. I need to know more. I need to talk to more perspectives than just what the media tells me. And so she immediately interpreted that to mean that I denied science. So she says, "Okay, so do you believe in any other sciences besides climate change?" So I came on and I said this. I said, I'm telling you, tell me about it. I don't believe science is something to believe in. Science is something that is, by its own standards, must unequivocally prove itself. I merely hold it to those standards without exception, which is exactly what you're talking about, because the two things that have changed in our reality, if we're going to talk about why there's so much divisiveness in the world, is that politics and science have somehow become religions to the people that adhere to them. They're like belief systems, and we have saviors in them now. Just like religion with Jesus and
we have the Christ child, Greta Thunberg.
Exactly my point.
No.
But it's true. But they use her as a Christ figure, as a savior for that religion.
And she'll be sacrificed, because all Christ figures are.
No, I don't doubt it. I don't think it's going to bode well. But that's the kind of thing that troubles me, because what's happening is that man. Look, religion's built in our DNA. Okay, it's built into our DNA. We are, if you want, for lack of a better word, we're programmed to be religious people. But when you throw God away and you throw legitimate religion away, you're going to have to replace it with something, because that need is going to be there. That void is not going to, nature abhors a vacuum. And it's going to find things to replace it with. And right now, politics and science are the replacements. And now they're starting to behave more like religions of the Dark Ages than the institutions that they're supposed to be. Science is supposed to be open-minded.
Reformations, and you'll have tribes against tribes.
Yes, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the demonizing of people who disagree with the mainstream thought. I mean,
was it G.K. Chesterton that said, when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing; they believe in anything.
Yeah, it's true.
Whatever's popular at the moment.
It is true. And that is what we're seeing. And that's actually...
And of course, my answer to the climate change, hysteria is to say, well, do I think we should do something about 2 degrees over 200 years or whatever it is? Maybe. At the cost of lifting the whole world out of absolute poverty? No. So no one ever looks at the trade-off. So so maybe man-made action has warmed up the planet, and maybe that's something that we're going to need to adapt to and deal with. But it's also lifted the vast majority of the world out of absolute poverty.
It has. We were looking at you guys can do this if you're interested, because it's on YouTube. You can just look it up. Just do a search of what I'm about to say. But one of the things that my wife and I like to do at night sometimes when we're just not in the mood for television and we just want something on that's ambient, but we're not really in the mood for music, is that there's these wonderful 4K walks of various cities around the world. You can just pick a city that you want to see, and I guarantee you, someone that has a 4K camera that has walked through for an hour and a half through some of the nice tourist spots, or where there's like nice sightseeing, and you can just kind of walk through the city of your choice in the world. It's a wonderful thing to do. And because it's the Chinese New Year, and we always celebrate the Chinese New Year with good Chinese food. And if you're on my Instagram, you probably saw some of the things I had this Chinese New Year's. It was wonderful. And we did a walkthrough of Shanghai. It's an amazingly modern city. I would say that there's nothing in the United States that even compares to the complexity of Shanghai. Vegas is the closest, but we only have like one little road, the Strip, which is not that big really when you think about it. But that's the only city I can think of in America that even comes close to the futuristic complexity of Shanghai today. And so I went to I just did another search because I was talking to my wife, and I said, when I was in school and we would study China, they would show us, all these people on bicycles, wearing rags, and it's such a fascinating thing to see how China has developed. And so I went and I typed in the search. I said, Shanghai, 1970s. I just typed that in, and sure enough, there was a documentary in 1973 of Shanghai. It's like a half-hour documentary. A journalist goes out there to the city, walks around, talks to people, and it's like the freaking Dark Ages. They're all no motor cars except for military or government vehicles and buses. They did have buses, but almost everyone was on bikes or walking. A lot of people didn't even have shoes on. And now this is one of the most futuristic cities. It's like walking into the 23rd century. It's like Star Trek, okay? That was industrialization that did that for them. That was all these things that apparently are causing climate change that did that for them. It brought them out of extreme poverty. Extreme poverty. Now they're living a pretty good life. In some ways, they might be living than most better. I mean, it used to be called the second world. I'm not sure you can refer to China as the second world anymore. It's a different type of first world, but it's very first world in its, at least in those places. I mean, there's still rural China. But it's catching up. The rest of the nation is catching up. That's something that we need to be mindful of, because if it is, and I'm not saying it's not, I don't want anyone to get on to me about this. Okay. I'm not saying that industrialization hasn't caused climate change. I'm saying I don't have enough information to give an answer as a voter, an American citizen. I don't have enough information to give an intelligent response. So my verdict's out. I'm listening to people.
Or to say whether the trade-off's worth it or not.
And that's the other side of the coin. Let's say it is. Let's say the mainstream scientists are right. Then what do we do about it? Because are we going to just push the world back into the dark ages?
We tell sub-Saharan Africans they can't have refrigeration.
Yeah. Because that's what's going to happen, Where all of the countries that are developing are going to just be thrown into the dirt, because the West is not going to give it up.
That's right.
I mean, let's face it. And I don't think a lot of places in the East are either, because look at Dubai. My God, you want to see a futuristic city? Look at Dubai. That was basically just a dust heap in the 1970s. Now it will rival anything in New York, Chicago, and LA combined.
Thanks to the fossil fuel industry.
Yes, exactly.
Because without it, they wouldn't have had any money. So, these things aren't complicated. We don't deal with, in this side of glory, we never deal with perfection. Utopian notions are follies and flawed. Yeah. We only have trade-offs. Yeah. You say, and the question people should always ask if they're thinking utopian thoughts is, compared to what?
Yeah.
Well,
there's no such thing.
Terrible now. Compared to what? Compared to doing your washing by hand and mangling it and hanging it up. Compared to what? Compared to having to go to a well 3 miles from your house to get drinking water. Compared to what?
Right.
So man's damaged the planet putting in plumbing. Yeah, it's true. We also have plumbed hospitals.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
we have irrigation.
And that
things.
needs to be part of the discussion, but they don't. They selectively push to be manipulative. Because see, this is my feeling on government, okay? Wherever they can't mandate, they manipulate. So it's one of the two M's, mandate or manipulate. If you can get away with it, mandate it. If you can't get away with it, manipulate it. Yeah. That's all they do. And they don't give you the full perspective. They just give you the part they want you to have so that you can be fully controlled and they don't have to deal with you questioning or using critical thinking. That's my problem with politics. And people will sometimes think I'm too hard on politicians. But I mean, how can I not be? Because I mean, I am so diametrically opposed to manipulation.
Well, they force us to pay for them, so that means we can criticize them.
Oh, that's true. That is true.
Lisa in the chat has just very generously accused us of being wise. I'm not sure which one it was.
Well, I'm very, very appreciative of that.
Well, what I normally say on the Feast of the Epiphany or even on Christmas Day is, and it's not my idea, it's my great hero Fulton Sheen's idea. Who was it that the angels told the Christ child was to be born? It was shepherds and wise men.
Yeah.
You know, shepherds, true. Those who know that they know nothing, and wise men, those who know that they do not know everything.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
That's what a wise man is.
I guess that since you mentioned the chat, I don't want to ignore our audience, and we still have, about 10-15 minutes where we can take some questions. Did any of you see any questions that maybe we need to answer?
We had one way back at the beginning from Artemis. Will we recognize each other in the afterlife? What is, or is there, love eternal without God?
Well, there isn't. I mean, without God, there is no
yeah, I think
eternal
we kind of
anything.
answered it during the show.
So that's true. As far as whether or not we recognize us in the afterlife, I mean, certainly in the Judeo-Christian sense, assuming one has attained to salvation and participates in entering into the kingdom through the resurrected body. Because remember, everyone resurrects, whether you're saved or not. The resurrection of the dead is all people, but only the saved actually get to go on and attain to eternal life. And so I would say that that's, at least in the Judeo-Christian mind, that we're going to look a lot like the way we do, but different. Just like Jesus's resurrected body was recognizable, but not entirely. But when they knew him, once they knew who they were talking to, then they could recognize him. But initially, it was obscured. So the resurrected body is different. It kind of like passes through walls at times. Sometimes he looks different.
It's a perfected body.
It's a perfected body, but it is still this one. It's just going to be made perfect. So yes, there's still going to be identity to that. It's a physical experience. It's not just spiritual. Sometimes I think people think of the kingdom of heaven as being an ethereal spiritual dimension. It's going to have physicality to it with a greater and more connected spirituality, clearly, because I don't think there'll be that separation. That divide between the two won't be so great as it is now for most of us. You won't have to be a mystic to not have, to kind of resolve that disconnect.
And this is where the Gnostics were wrong. In my opinion, because the Gnostics would, the idea was you had to escape the body.
The body was evil.
Only pure spirit.
The body was
good.
A prison of the soul, they would call it.
Yeah. And we don't believe that. We believe that we are embodied souls, and that we will always be embodied souls. Did
you know, Father, that the reason that Christianity adopted these puritanical notions of sex being dirty, like a dirty thing, and we have to be prim and proper and not talk about it, because the Jews aren't like that. We're
not allowed to enjoy it.
Yeah, not allowed to enjoy it. Not allowed to. I mean, I know that there were even things where people in certain periods of history had to do it with the lights out, because you're not allowed to look, because that could cause lustful thoughts and all sorts of things. It's just utilitarian. Just get it done,
That's
have the
just
baby.
sad.
It's very sad, but that's the way it was. That's the way it was in some time periods. Not all time periods, but a lot of them were like this. You know where that came from? The Gnostics, because they saw sex as the source of imprisoning the body. So it stopped having sex so that you would not imprison more souls on this awful planet. That's where it came from. Yeah.
And because bodies are evil, and so it's and it really did destroy Christian thinking in lots of. I mean, not everywhere, and not even within particular denominations. It was present within all of them, actually, just to different degrees in different places. But I mean, I think rightly has been, and probably as recently as the 1980s, really onwards, churches have really rejected that nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, it's not healthy. It's not healthy. But I mean, I remember, look, this was as far back as me being in college, which was a while ago, but not that long ago. And I remember I went to a private school that was owned by and operated by the First Baptist Church, but they made the school a non-denominational school. And while faculty had to be professed Christians, students did not. You didn't have to be a Christian or part of any religion at all to be enrolled in the school. But you were required to go to their chapel and once a week or so, how often, to get credits for chapel each semester in order to pass. It was one of their requirements. And the little services were just absolutely horrible, evangelical-like services. So I hated it with a passion. I just used the time to study when it wasn't so noisy that I could actually pay attention to what I was reading.
Inoculate you against religion.
Yeah, pretty much. And
it's like a vaccine.
It was like that. It felt like that. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, it was very interesting because in my first year as a freshman, at this point, I had resolved myself that I wasn't going to be a priest. And so that was the first time in my life where I allowed myself to start dating, because prior to that, my entire intention was to become a priest. So I didn't see the point. I didn't want the distraction. I didn't want the chance that I would fall in love with someone and completely have to choose between this person that I love and God. And it scared the hell out of me because I knew my vocation so well, and I knew that I had to act on it. And of course, back then it was the Roman Catholic Church or nothing. So I didn't even think that there would ever be a way that this could be realized. So the way I handled it was I just refused to date. So they probably thought I was gay or something in the closet. Who knows what they thought? Because here I am in high school, just not all these girls, all these girls wanting to go out, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm sure it looked terrible, but I didn't give a damn. And so, in college, I loosened up. I decided that enough was enough, and I need to start living a normal life again now. And so I started dating regularly, all the time, going out almost every night with someone different. And I was fascinated, because I probably went on maybe 20 or 30 dates in my first semester with a different girl. And in the second semester of my freshman year, after the Christmas break, more than half of those girls were already married. And you want to know why? Because this is the first time they have had an opportunity to be able to actually engage in their sexuality. And because they have been indoctrinated by these really hardcore religious school.
You have to get married now.
Yes. Yeah. And the only way you can have legitimate sex, of course, is to get married. So they weren't seeing it as like this long-term commitment here. They're just seeing it, I got to do it in a way that is right in God's eyes, and it will all work out. I'm sure most of them are divorced today, but this was the thing. There was one in particular, one girl that I remember telling me that when she went to high school, she went to some religious high school, the girls were not allowed to walk on the same side of the campus as the boys. They could attend the same classes, but they had separate doors to enter the schoolrooms. so that there could not be any, funny business on the way to class.
In separate schools in the first place. That's what's gone wrong with the whole world.
I'm telling you. I mean, but this was the kind of lunacy that, what an unhealthy relationship to sex that was. And in my opinion, just as bad, just as disastrous as pornography or,
well, it's so repressive.
Yes.
It's
too much.
All it does is put a massive highlighter on it, doesn't it? It doesn't make it go away. It puts it
well, and that's it, because humans are going to human, right? I mean, eventually the natural drives.
They're gonna rebel, and they're gonna,
Yeah, and you're going to get yourself into a whole lot of more trouble, I think.
We can't do that? Why not? Well, let's go find out.
Yeah. And they're going to do
fun.
it. Yeah, I mean, it was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. Because there was like a few of those girls that I actually liked enough to want to like connect with, and I thought, well, maybe I'll ask her out again. And oh, she's married now. Oh wait, I'll do this. Okay, this one's married too. And what the hell's going on here?
You drove them all to get hitched there, Bishop.
Oh, I hope not. I might have to confess that if that's true. Oh, because I'm sure that did not work out. Maybe a few of them did, but they just got married too fast. It's like, my goodness, they were dating me. Who knows who else they might have been dating at that time? But I mean, to just get married over the Christmas break, I couldn't. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the kind of stuff that I would see. And it was shocking to me. And that's the kind of stuff that, I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on here, but that's not healthy, so that I think hopefully more of the mainstream churches are taking a more healthy approach to that. Because that's part of the problem, is that I think people feel disconnected from the church in the modern day because, in some ways it doesn't feel relevant.
There are some positive things to the sort of rampant secularism that we exist in now. One of them is that the people, although there may be fewer people in our church, I mean, Pope Benedict said this, the church of the future will be smaller, but it'll be more faithful. In other words, there's no kudos for going to church now. You don't get any points for it. Maybe in America, maybe your politicians still get some points for being.
Oh, they do.
Faithful. Yeah, see, in Britain it's the opposite.
Unless you're Joe Biden going for communion, then they look down on you.
I know all about that. But in Britain it's the opposite. Like British politicians, if they are men and women of faith, don't ever want to reveal that. Like, that's not a selling point for a British politician. It's the opposite. So that is quite an interesting cultural difference. But so what I'm saying is that certainly in Australia, and in Australia the same, they hate the fact that Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, is an evangelical charismatic Christian.
Yeah.
I don't particularly love it, but for different reasons. But what I mean is, because there's no like societal pressure for people to go to church, you can be sure that the people that are there because they're actually genuinely pursuing faith.
Right, right.
So there's a good thing. The same's true of marriage. That in a permissive age where people can do whatever they want to do, and then actually it's almost the opposite pull not to get married. You can be pretty sure that if people approach when they approach marriage, it's probably more for better reasons than the ones you just described.
Yes.
You would hope so.
I would hope so.
There are some fruits from this.
I mean, that's the challenge of it, is that...
Yeah, I mean, people should get married because they actually fell in love, not because they feel obligated to.
Yeah.
I mean, it when it happens, but that's the thing, is that I feel like that is broken in people that were raised this way because they don't have the right discernment. And see, I mean, discernment is I would say, of all the gifts of the Holy Spirit, I would say discernment is one of the most important, and it's the one that seems to be the least cultivated. All these people in the charismatic movement trying to get tongues and all this crap. It's like, what are you going to do with tongues? But discernment, it will guide you through your entire life. That's the one you should be looking for.
It'll also guide you in tongues as well, because how do you know it's not the demons speaking through you?
That's true. I've had that.
I've never ever understood that. That you're supposed to have an interpreter. Paul says.
Yes,
I've never met one.
No, because they don't want to talk about that. That would be. I guess breaking the paradigm. But hey, guess what? Speaking of breaking the paradigm, it's the end of the show.
Oh man,
it goes so fast. Always does. Unfortunately, Patti couldn't join us, but she'll be back. We'll have her back on. And next week, we've got a real fun show for you. We have Dr. Michael Grossa returning from last season, is when you first met him. He's going to talk about UFOs and UAPs. Has some real interesting things to talk about on government disclosure. I love doing at least one show on UFOs every season, so this is going to be the one. I think you're going to have a good time with it. Father Chris, Sister Mary Joan, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Take care and God bless. And all of you, I'll see you next week. And if not, out there somewhere in the ether. Good night.